Recently, drawing with colored pencils has been a way for me to unplug from client work and draw for myself. Today I'm going to be drawing one of my multicolored hair girls with some mismatched shoes. So without further ado, let's jump into it. I'll be working from this thumbnail sketch that I made prior. I like to map out my drawings with a sketch beforehand because on the whole, a tiny bit of preparation really helps me cut back on composition struggles later in the process. For now, I'll be sketching and underdrawing fairly lightly with a 20% warm gray pencil. Once that's roughly sketched out, I go back over it with an eraser and clean up as much as I can while keeping the guiding lines intact. Although I don't recommend starting with the fine details of a crucial point such as a face, I don't always adhere to my better judgment. I say this is poor judgment because it's better to warm up your muscle memory first when tackling finer details. There's also the danger that the sharpened tip of the pencil may snap within the first few strokes, so it's better to do a few test strokes beforehand. Also, if I were to do this the right way, I would not have long polished nails while drawing this. Not only is the grip real awkward, but swiping any pencil shavings could potentially mark the paper with nail polish pigment. Alas, I'm not that sharp. Going into a colored pencil drawing, I typically don't have a set color scheme in mind. However, I do know of artists that digitally plan their color palette ahead of time, which I'm sure saves them a lot of headaches down the road if they're working with a very complex drawing, for instance. And this might also help you as well. But I am lazy, so this is the way that lazy people do things. Some of my bigger gripes about drawing with colored pencils include the amount of time you spend blowing or brushing away pencil shavings, as well as how often you must sharpen your pencils. I can't tell you how many times I've decimated a pencil just because the lead kept breaking in the sharpener. What's the point of a sharpener like that? I think this is why many artists resort to sharpening their leads with an X-Acto knife instead. You can be a lot more gentle with a brittle lead this way. But other than this, I'd posit that colored pencils are one of the most beginner-friendly of art mediums. The learning curve is way more gentle than, say, your watercolors and your oils. There's also myriad ways to apply colored pencils. While I tend to press firmly and gravitate toward flat colors, you can do a lot with layering, stippling, cross-hatching, and blending. When working with finer details like the face, I often find myself holding my breath with each stroke. It may sound a little woo-woo, but I do think that altering your breathing can have an impact on the smoothness of a line. Kinda like holding your breath while putting on winged eyeliner, but hopefully with less redrawing. The one thing about starting with a head or face is that whatever colors used in the hair begin to set the palette and can be echoed throughout the rest of the drawing. For example, the peach, turquoise, plum, and chartreuse are all colors that you'll see repeated throughout the illustration further down the line. You may have also noticed that for the darkest areas, I don't actually use the color black. Long ago, I lost my black colored pencil, and since then, I've been mixing the darkest colors in my set to achieve the darkest value. And after being forced not to use black, I like the richness that this brings more so than an actual black Prismacolor. This is also the type of exercise that art professors may impose on their students, so I apologize if you've begrudgingly heard this before. One thing I've also been enjoying about my colored pencils practice is the set of constraints that it presents. You'd think that this would be a bad thing, but having a limited amount of colors to choose from actually forces me to make combinations of pre-existing elements and examine solutions that may not have been apparent to me otherwise. This is in contrast to working digitally with the full gamut of RGB, where the seemingly endless spectrum can be stupidly intimidating. When it comes to layering colors, I prefer to start with a darker color first, and then go over it with a lighter one. I think the lighter color just helps to seal the darker one in. For instance, layering this olive green under the chartreuse. I like to do it this way because for me, it makes the blending a little bit smoother, like butter. There are also less consistencies in the overall blend, and I've noticed less pilling? Whatever it's called when the paper is too loaded up with pigment so that the stubble or lead shavings accumulates. If they could invent a pencil that didn't do that, that would be so nice. Working from dark to light also helps when it comes to blending to create new colors. There's this light mint that I really want in the drawing, but I don't actually own the color I'm seeking. What I can do, however, is use this pencil, True Green, and go over the areas I want with a medium amount of pressure applied. I don't want to press at the maximum pressure with this, as I would normally for pure pigments. We want to leave enough surface area for blending the second color, for which I'll be using the color Cloud Blue. With the Cloud Blue, I'm going to apply greater pressure, taking care to fill in all the white space that the green has left behind, and making micro circular strokes to blend with the green. I think it's best to grip the pencil as close as you can to the point so you can minimize lead breakage. Though in this vid my grip is slightly further so you can have a better view of what I'm doing. Now it's time to work those shoes. You may remember that the sketch is slightly different from the colored pencil drawing, in that I replaced the original boots with these platformy sandals instead. This is based on a separate shoe study that I just really wanted to color. If I'm being honest, I think I like the shapes in the sketchbook study version better, but I'll just have to settle for this one having color instead. We'll also complete the floral embellishments in higher fidelity than our study. Florals remain a big component of my work, not only because I maintain a deep appreciation of plants, see my studio houseplant tour for greater elaboration, but also because of the influence that William Morris has had on my work. If you're not familiar with William Morris, he was, and I quote Wikipedia, a British textile designer, poet, novelist, translator, and social activist associated with the British arts and crafts movement. But his work can best be recognized by its lavish, flowing florals. I only learned about him because he was in the bargain book section of Borders, may he rest in peace, and the cheap price and cover caught my eye. You might think that that's rather sketchy, but it was an influence on me after doing a few studies of his work. something that I try to stay conscious of when planning compositions is the movement of a piece. By this, I mean the way your eye moves across the canvas, or paper in this case. With this example, your eyes likely start with the most prominent feature of the illustration, in this case, the exaggerated proportions of her footwear. But lines like the details of the sock are designed to further guide your eye and accentuate the form of the figure's leg. The lines of the leg should guide you ultimately to the face. The reverse may also be true, that your eyes began with the face and ended with the feet because of our face-seeking brains. The aim here is to create visual hierarchy, though, so that the visual elements are harmonious and don't compete too much for the eye. I enjoy a sense of dynamism in the things that I draw, even if a character has a fairly stationary pose. But things like proportions and patterns can play a huge role in providing a feeling of movement, just by getting your eye to travel. We've talked about exaggerated proportions earlier, but I think adding patterns to a staid character's clothing can definitely cheat your eye and add more dynamism to an illustration. I know next to nothing about textile design, but it's something that I'd love to study more. In a drawing at least, patterns can really provide an extra bit of texture and contrast, particularly when you mix and match organic and angular forms. For example, in her skirt and shoes. Echoing the colors from the hair, I decided to use pink in the shoes, along with yellow and chartreuse embellishments. I still wanted to introduce some chaos though, thus the mismatched turquoise shoe. But there is some intentionality behind making the other shoe a different color. When making a cohesive palette, I try to echo a color in at least 2 different places. Seeing repetition within a piece just makes it feel more balanced. The only times I may forego this is when I want to highlight a very specific thing with an illustration, or if it's part of an analogous color grouping. With skin tones, I tend to keep it simple with 2 to 3 colors on top of the paper. Since her clothes and shoes are already fairly flat in style, it just makes sense to extend that flat aspect to the skin. We can do this with a suggestion of shadows and very simple shapes. After skin tones are lightly introduced, that's about it. And this is the finished illustration. Thanks so much for watching till the end. Until next time.